Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. Get sterilized for a shorter prison sentence. We've got that story plus Toronto's DIY staircase scandal. But first, China shuts down 3,918 illegal websites in the second quarter. A total of 3,918 illegal websites were shut down by China's internet watchdogs from April to June of 2017. The Cyberspace Administration of China said in a big statement this past Saturday. The websites included those that published content that, of course, jeopardized national security, that old classic, and those that spread violence, vulgarity, ungrounded rumors. Up to 316 cases related to illegal websites were handed to judicial organs in the same period. More than 810,000 illicit cyber accounts were also closed in the second quarter of the year. Now, James, this is all a part of kind of a giant push that's been going on in China, and longtime watchers of New World Next Week will know that this is not a new story, and we have been covering this. Another interesting angle to this is a sort of what they're calling a media purification. The Global Times is calling it. In the past few weeks, a series of new restrictions on online media has been released. A few video streaming sites had their content removed, and shows and forums being closely monitored to purify the online environment. Bilibili, a popular Chinese video sharing website, they were the ones who had a lot of their things sort of removed. And it almost smacks of, James, sort of what Google and the rest are trying to do here in the States. If I sort of Google, I want to join ISIS, it'll give you these recommendations for, countering the extremism. And it seems like this is a similar thing. While it's not necessarily terror related, it's more about sort of the moral code, I guess, James?
Yeah, well, this is the future of internet censorship, I think, globally, but this is where it starts and this is what it looks like. So just as we saw China talking about the idea of social credit scores, post something nice about the government on social media and you get extra points and you can redeem them for, getting your visa to go on a trip abroad or whatever. Well, Canada comes out a couple years after that with carrot rewards. Hey guys, if you take your flu shot, then hey, you can get some points and redeem them for, Petro-Canada points or whatever. So this is how the agenda rolls out. We see it happening in China, and then we see other countries adopting it. So this happens with the UK and floating the idea of their various filters that they're trying to do for the internet. Australia's flirted with these ideas. Well, China actually does it. And as you say, it isn't about terrorism or some kind of national security thing. Well, it's national security for the Chinese Communist Party, which means anything they don't like. If you have thought crimes, if you don't say the right things, if you're trying to talk about something they don't want you to talk about, they'll shut down your website. It is illegal. And this pervades the entire mindset of the Chinese government, and it filters down to the Chinese people, who have really two options. One, well, just go with it. What are you going to do? Or two, try to get around the Great Firewall of China by things like VPNs. Well, of course, we've seen the Chinese government cracking down on VPNs, and I think you might have a follow-up story on that regard. But before we get to that, I think it's important for this story, again, there's nothing fundamentally new about this. The fact that the Chinese Communist Party believes they own the Chinese people and the Chinese internet, and they decide what's legal and illegal, and they won't let you look at those vicious ideas they don't like. There's nothing new about this story. We already know it, and we know that this is the ultimate end goal of the technocrats worldwide. So let's just use this as a moment for reflection for all those rah-rah, BRICS are going to be they're going to be the anti-NATO, oh yay, the BRICS will save us from everything, like the Chinese Communist Party that has this level of control over the internet. You really think they're going to be the saviors? They're going to be the ones that we want in charge instead of the American empire? It's just clownish thinking to believe that the Chinese government has anyone's interest in mind but their own. And, welcome to reality. This is the future of the internet.
So as you mentioned VPNs, I do have a couple of related stories. This, James, could almost be expanded out to its own episode of the Asia-Pacific perspective, I suppose. Beijing said back in January that it would start restricting virtual private networks, or VPNs. And this month reportedly told their three big telecoms to start blocking individuals' access to them by early next year. However, it's not all that bad. The use of VPNs will not affect individuals and companies that have received government approval. So said a spokesperson from the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, because, James, of course, as we just mentioned, Chinese law forbids the spread of harmful information on the internet, including that related to terrorism and violence. The other related story, I guess this gets to the heart of the terrorism and violence boogeyman, China force installing spyware onto Muslim citizens' phones to monitor them, and users who deleted or didn't install the app when prompted to could be detained for up to 10 days, according to other social media users. We get that from our good buddy Brock West on the tweets. As again, that could have been just its own probably entire episode. And like you're saying, none of it is entirely new. And I think in the scariest ways, it's the forecast of what is coming for the Western nations. James, our second segment this week is another sort of police state two-parter, and the first part was easily the most submitted story to Media Monarchy this last week, and I think it was probably a similar situation for Corbet Report as well. Multiple European companies have been experimenting with the idea of implanting microchips in their employees, and the trend wasn't really popular here in the States. That situation may change as 3 Square Market plans to implant RFID microchips in employees' hands. Although this is a marketing campaign more than anything else, it shows there is a potential market for such implants. So the partnership between 3 Square Market and Biohax, that's Biohax, this whole development is probably going to be worth following. Both parties will focus on equipping 32M, that's 3 Square Market, employees with bio-friendly RFID microchips. The chips are implanted in employees' hands and can be used to pay for garbage food near the multiple break rooms and the food dispensers. It is a marketing stunt, yet it also makes the Wisconsin-based company the first U.S. enterprise to implant RFID microchips. Now, there will be no requirement to have these chips implanted, and it is completely voluntary. On August 1st, there's going to be a chip party during which these implants will be introduced to employees. James, we've heard, was it sort of like techno nightclubs in Brazil, and we've heard of amusement parks, and we've heard of places rolling out, get the chip for easier access to our parks, but this is the first kind of American business implementation of it.
Perhaps the first American business implementation, but you pointed out 2 important things there. 1, it's all voluntary, guys. You don't have to do it. And 2, this is essentially a PR campaign. That's what it is. I mean, it's a gimmick, really. Oh, yeah, you can buy things from the crap food dispenser in the company canteen. It's ridiculous. But you're right. This is absolutely not a fundamentally new story. We've seen variations and iterations of it for a long time, which is why I feel like I've covered this story numerous times in the past. And we can go back, as you say, there was the Baja Beach Club in Spain in 2004. Clubbers choose chip implants to jump queues. Yeah, you get the chip, and then you don't have to wait in line to get into the Baja Beach Club in Spain. That's a good reason to get your microchip implanted, right? Now, interestingly, in 2007, you might not know this, but California actually passed a law to ban forced RFID tagging. So there was some legislation that they came up with that said that employers cannot force employees to get RFID tagged. That was Senate Bill 362, which was signed into law by Governor Schwarzenegger back in 2007 and went into effect on January 1st, 2008, which is why, at least in California, theoretically, you'll never see a company that will force employees to do this. It'll always be voluntary. Hey, guys, you want the chip. It's so cool. But again, many stories about this in the past. 2014, happier, more productive. Would tagging your workforce transform your business? That from CNN.com, Fake News Central. 2014 also, Business Insider, microchips will be implanted into healthy people sooner than you think. 2015, Office puts chips under staff's skin, talking about Epicenter in Sweden, which got a ton of coverage at the time for that bold move. And even earlier this year, April 2017, from the LA Times, they had a story up on companies start implanting microchips into workers' bodies. So we've seen this many times in the past. Here's another one. And interestingly, as you say, you got tons of people emailing you about it. I got dozens of emails and tweets about this story. People are going crazy about this story as if it's something new, which is interesting. It tells me a couple of things. 1, this is a PR campaign. They want to shove this idea in the public's face. And yeah, a lot of the public will recoil with horror at it. But that's part of the indoctrination. That's how you get started into it. You shove it in people's faces, and everyone talks about it, and eventually people start to go, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea. That is the process of indoctrination, and that's how these things get entered into the public consciousness. And just to top off our little blast from the past, let's not forget our good friend Brian Williams, back in 2007, anchoring an NBC program on the year 2017. Where they introduced the idea that by the year 2017, it won't be so uncommon to have a little microchip implanted in you so that, if you get hurt and you go to the hospital, well, they'll have your medical records right there. It'll be great. That's the year 2017, folks. It's been implanted in your consciousness for at least a decade, brought to you by Mr. Fake News himself, Brian Williams. Brian Williams, yeah, that's his name, right? Anyway... So this, again, it's an idea they keep circling around, and it'll just be little stories like this here and there to get people talking until it becomes a more and more common idea. And the key is voluntary. They're going to make you want to get it. It'll be the cool thing to do. It'll be the iPhone of the next generation. What, you don't have a chip yet? Oh my God, you're so behind the times. That's the way it's going to be brought to the public. Not by the point of a gun, not by making people do it, but by getting people to want to do it. And stories like this are the first step in that indoctrination process.
You actually remind me, James, I forgot one of the relateds in all those stories back in segment 1. And it was a New World Next Week flashback to just several weeks ago. China's leading search engine to require real name registration for its services. I think that relates directly to what you're talking about here with the microchip. Well, it won't be forced on you, but it'll be voluntary if you want to, work or eat or get a job or do anything. That's probably the force that's coming. Another related to this, James, this is a pretty dark episode of New World Next Week. It is New World Next Week episode 318 for July 27th, 2017, if you are keeping score. And related to this story about the RFID chips, I've got one out of Tennessee. Tennessee jails offer inmates shorter sentences in exchange for sterilization. And I think, in a way, these two stories, of course, have a lot of things in common. The police state, eugenics, again, with the panopticon. But I think one of the things we might not think of is that, again, as you're just saying, they're both free. These RFID chips, which cost $300 a piece, will be given to those employees for free. And, of course, this charge of sterilizing inmates in Tennessee jails, the taxpayers will eat up that cost. The state will eat up the cost of sterilizing the undesirables. So that's quite the double whammy deal. And in some ways, James, I think, again, we probably could have expanded this sterilization story out to its own entire full segment. And for a little bit more about that, I did actually talk about that story this morning on my own Morning Monarchy. If I can do a shameless plug here, I do an hour-long live radio broadcast each and every morning, Monday through Friday, and go over a lot of these areas that, James, I may just sort of mention them in the short version as the days go by, and hopefully here on New World Next Week, we can hopefully maybe revisit them sometimes and expand on them more. And again, everything we say and play always included in the show notes. So, nobody has to take our word for any of this. They can read all the articles and watch the videos and do more research for themselves. Our third and final story this week was another one that was submitted to us a lot, and sometimes even using hashtag good news next week. Toronto man builds park stairs for $550 after the city gave a $65,000 estimate. City officials in Toronto were upset over the fact that a resident took it upon himself to fix a problem the government was slow to deal with, and he did it for a fraction of the cost. As Canada's CTV reported, a Toronto man who spent $550 building a set of stairs in his community park says he has no regrets, despite the city's insistence that he should have waited for a $65,000 city project to handle the problem. The city was then threatening to tear down the stairs because they weren't built to regulation standards. 80 Astle, a retired mechanic, said he was tired of watching his neighbors fall down the steep path that leads to a community garden. So he bought the materials and set out to do it himself. He even hired a homeless guy to help him build it, and they did it in a couple of hours. So the inevitable part 2 update to this story: City of Toronto tears down handyman's park stairs. And this is from just a day or so ago. But fortunately, the third and final update to this story, James, is only from about 4 or 5 hours ago from the CTV. Again, Toronto replaces stairs at Etobicoke Park. The new set was installed on this day, Wednesday, July 26th, that will cost the city no more than $10,000. So there you have it, James.
The freedom's the answer. What's the question? Maybe the question is what is government unable to provide? And this is a great story that relates to our earlier story about the anarchist pothole fixers. You remember that one? People going around, the city's not repairing the pothole. We're going to repair the pothole. And it becomes, of course, some illegal activity. How dare you try to fix the roads without the government has a monopoly over this space, this geographical location. And if you try to get in on their monopoly, they're going to tear down your work at any rate, like this staircase. So this is, it's just a perfect example of everything that's wrong with this system, and the fact that the government believes that they own this space and they control what happens to it, and if you build a staircase, we're going to tear it down and probably fine you or charge you in some way for daring to mess with our wonderful space. And also, of course, it demonstrates that when there is a monopoly and they can spend whatever they want, $65,000 for a staircase, sure. Oh, wait, no, they did for $550, we're getting some bad press. Oh, let's make a $10,000 staircase. They just pay whatever they want. They pay as much or as little as they want, and of course all the graft goes to all the people that are connected to the teat of government. That's what government is about. It is a giant trough that has been created to basically feed all of these swine and to keep them complacent. And so direct action like this, I'm always bringing it back to direct action that people can do. Well, you can build this staircase. You can get together with your community and affect your community. And the government can come in and try to tear it down and say you can't do that. But the whole point is they got a giant black eye from all of the press coverage of this. Again, this probably the second most sent to me story of the past week. People are really interested in this story because it demonstrates the stupidity of government. The more we can demonstrate the stupidity of government, I think the better it is, because we delegitimize this imaginary ruling class in the minds of the people and make them realize, no, this is your community. This is not the government's community. You should be in charge of what's happening there. And rather than having a government extort money from everyone so that they can go and build $65,000 staircases, maybe eventually several years down the road, no, take it matters into your own hands. So my hat's off to people who are doing that and demonstrating the stupidity and the violence that underlies all government everywhere.
That's a good news way to kind of wrap up this New World Next Week episode. However, I do have one update to a story we talked about just a couple of weeks ago, James. DARPA announces $65 million in funding to make CRISPR gene editing safer and more effective. This just 4 weeks after we reported for you that CRISPR gene editing can cause hundreds of unintended mutations. James, I believe I also saw a tweet just as we were kind of going to air here that some of the first CRISPR gene editing done on human embryos was maybe just performed, and I think it was probably performed right here in Portland, Oregon, which is where the anarchists were taken to the streets to fill in the potholes. So we'll include that, just again, include everything that we say in place so people can do the rest of the research. And we'll implore you that if you like this work, if you find independent, non-commercial alternative media valuable, we appreciate your support and becoming a Patreon or becoming a subscriber in any of those numbers of ways to support our work. James, I'll throw it back to you for a little bit of deprogramming notes to wrap up this episode.
Yes, well, I just want to let everyone know it is summer, so James and I and our schedules are going to be a little bit looser over the next couple of weeks. So I'm not planning on taking vacation per se, but there will be less, I think, coming out from the Corbet Report in the next couple of weeks, including no New World Next Weeks for the next couple of weeks. We'll be back later in August, and we'll set that time later on, but at any rate, just keep in mind that the New World Next Week will have a brief summer hiatus.
And that will do it, James. I'll throw in the one last bit that when we do return, I'll be a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and ready to continue on making media monarchy.
All right.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, excellent. Let's do it again in a couple weeks. See you then.
All right, take care.